Thanks, Yuki. And thank you to everyone who's in the room and is spending some time with us, learning a little bit about the evidence synthesis social sciences support we are working on here at UCLA Library. This is the quartet who will be chatting with you. Fran, Kelsey, Michelle, and I are all librarians who have roles that involve high contact with researchers and patrons across the campus in a variety of disciplines and topics. This is the path. We're going to be walking you through a little bit about our institutional context, and then ramping up to why are we here. The couple of case studies based on actual researchers, no AI content from our team today, a little bit about our reflections on our experience and what might be coming. So institutional context, starting us off, UCLA Library is part of the University of California, Los Angeles, 10 campuses in the UC system. We have approximately 47,000 students. Just had graduation, so we have fewer students today than we did Friday. We have 5,500 faculty approximately. And just thinking about the Division of Social Sciences alone, we have many, many thousands of students. We have many, many hundreds of faculty, more than 37 departments and research centers, and clearly more people work in social sciences research than are in the division. We are very much fortunate and grateful to our biomedical evidence synthesis experts here. They have been running off and on an evidence synthesis program for many years, and they've been our mentors and consultants and really are carrying the bulk of evidence synthesis support at this campus. We, as the quartet, were part of an intact group responsible for social sciences, amongst other areas, and we were seeing more and more non-sciences evidence synthesis questions coming in. So we wanted to better support them, and we've gone through team and personal journeys for that. Last bullet alludes to the UCLA Library is going through a structural review. We heard a little bit about chaos in Matt's talk this morning. This is a chance for the library to better align itself with campus priorities and processes and policies and units and structure. So I'm going to pass it to Fran, talk a little bit about background.
Thank you, Angela. Yes, next slide. All right, so really I'm going to delve more into that sort of last section Angela was talking about, and the four of us coming together to form our team that we call the Social Sciences Evidence Synthesis Team. Very original, SEST. It all really started with ESI, the Evidence Synthesis Institute that we all attended back in August of 2024. And after that, we talked about really wanting to continue to build these skills that we were learning around evidence synthesis and build the capacity for that work, especially with those increasing consultations that we were requests we were seeing. And then at the same time, we were inspired to sort of explore options for creating a sustainable service model as that was growing. And so, yeah, we were working together to sort of figure that out. Next slide, please. At the same time, we started working on a rapid review together. This is our own ES project that we really wanted to do to, our own curiosities, but also strengthen our competencies around evidence synthesis and ideally inform our service model that we were looking towards. At the moment, we're going through this restructure, as was mentioned, so some of the service model plans are on hold while we're kind of getting moved around and our job titles and responsibilities are evolving, but definitely some opportunity there. And in the meantime, work is going on as always. We're working on our project and continuing to support each other's evidence synthesis requests. And to talk more about that, I'm going to pass it off to Michelle.
Yes. So this is just one of the few case studies that we'll just highlight that we work together as a team. So one of the first case studies we're highlighting is with a education graduate student who came in with a request. Her research topic was investigating Black feminist thought in higher education using mixed methods. So this is a consultation that both Kelsey and I actually dual consulted on. The reason why we chose to have two people from the SES team to work on this consultation with the graduate student is because Kelsey brought in really that niche subject expertise where she has a background in gender studies from both working as a liaison and as a having a BA in that in that topic, whereas I myself have a background in linguistics and dabbled a little bit in computer science. So that really helped with the technical part of the consultation because we were primarily helping the student work on developing her search string for the social sciences databases. And so having that logic-based line-by-line coding background really did help in that part. Some key takeaways from this dual consultation was that documentation is super, super helpful when consulting with the student. One for our internal learning and tracking on like what search terms, which keywords, which field tags work the best. Having that shared expectation of what inclusion exclusion criteria the patron had to bring to the consultations, as well as seed articles. An obstacle that we noticed very quite early on when it came to social sciences evidence synthesis support specifically was that thesauruses in the databases not quite helpful when it comes to these super niche topics. So having those seed articles to just cross-check, cross-reference against our parallel searches was really helpful to make sure that we were on the right track. But more to talk about that part in later slides. So I'll hand it off to Kelsey now for another case study.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So our second case study centers on a project with a much larger scope. So this project was a paleontology scoping review that included faculty at UCLA and other institutions, and also 2 librarians from the University of Minnesota. In addition to being a fascinating topic and a pleasure to work with the whole team, this was also a super valuable learning experience. We got to test our newly developed consultation intake form, and we also got to see the approach used by the University of Minnesota. We learned more about which topics worked well in email or comments and which need to be conversations. And we also realized the importance of clear documentation for completing asynchronous work to have more efficient meetings so that we could review our work instead of explaining our notes. And for me personally, this was my first experience working on a research project that involved multiple universities. And I learned so much about tracking projects with a long variable timeline. And I really wish we had more time to share some of what we learned. But I think the biggest takeaway is that our experience reaffirmed our approach of collaboratively supporting evidence synthesis projects. It took the pressure off of remembering every single database nuance or step of the review process. We caught so many search string errors and we could talk out our ideas and our issues, especially because peer review of the search string and terms were a very formal part of this process. And now I'll talk about reflections. So overall, we learned more from this work than we can talk about in 15 minutes. So we're just going to focus on a few resources that we used. So these are often used overlapping in different phases, but we tried to organize them for clarity. And we'll go into a few of these in more detail. So as evidence in our 2 case studies, the projects we support vary wildly in topic, scope, and researcher skill. So we needed a bank of resources that are customized for these various needs. And some of these were adapted from materials from other universities, and some of them were created by us in response to consultations. And then another benefit of creating this collection was having materials to offer to respond to requests that we were not going to be able to support through consultations. So we kept these materials in a Google folder for ease of directly sharing with patrons. And I'm going to pass it to Michelle to review our library.
Okay. So in our next slide, there's just a quick screenshot of the folders we used in our shared Zotero library. You'll notice that some of the folders are just organized for both internal learning between the SES team and then for external sharing with researchers. Of course, we were also, once again, still exploring what service model could happen in the future when supporting these patrons, hence the reason why we have different things in this library. But just to kind of highlight some resources that we did use both internally and externally, in our next slide, we do have a few resources that are all linked. So for ourselves, as we briefly mentioned, we are working on our own rapid review. So having the OSF was really helpful to kind of get inspiration from other researchers on how to conduct search protocols and so on and so forth. Also, while we were addressing patron consultations. The University of Minnesota's ES consultation timeline was really helpful to just really understand what expectations to build on like the level of engagement and timeline that we were expecting with these different types of patrons, to what extent. And also on the other side for researchers. So when we are consulting with researchers, people may have heard about the Cornell decision tree. So helpful on just really making sure that we have that shared understanding of like what type of review the patron can do in what time frame is also very important. And I'm not going to go through the entire list, but I do want to point out the last bit, last link on this slide, which is the USC Library Systematic Reviews LibGuide, which was very helpful because they had a search template that we adapted for our own consultations. So we're actually going to show a little glimpse of how we adapted it for our own use. So this is just a screenshot of like one of the search concepts for case study one that we did with our patron. You'll notice that there is like concept, search term, search string, and then larger search string. This was super helpful for really building that shared understanding with the patron and also how to teach the patron because that patron, it was her first time doing evidence synthesis. It was also kind of one of our few first times consulting and explaining how to do a search in social sciences databases for this patron. So having everything broken down bit by bit on like numbers of results, what field tags should be used for which search term was super helpful. Other things we added was a notes section for edits. This is not shown in a screenshot, but we also have separate sheets for each database that we worked on for translation purposes, because of course that will also vary cross topic and it's much easier to explain to the patron like, oh, now you have to change this field tag to this formatting, and then beautiful indents and everything so it doesn't look too overwhelming for the patron. But yes, back to Kelsey.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to try and keep it brief because I can talk about this form all day. So I know the form is cut off. This is just to show you the general layout. So this form is our consultation intake form. We send it when we receive a request, and it is intentionally basic and very straightforward to fill out. Because if a patron finds something of this sort of straightforward nature too onerous to fill out, it tends to be a sign that the project of an evidence synthesis scale might not be the right fit for what they're working on. And by using a Google Doc over a Google form, patrons can easily see all of the questions and their answers at once to avoid duplicating information. There's also an opportunity for the patron to revise their answers, easily link to other documentation and share it with others, saves a lot of back and forth. It's also much simpler to review together in consultation. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the sections. So there are three main sections to the form. As you saw on the previous slide, it starts with a very basic agenda template, and that serves to set expectations of the consultation being a conversation. Then we ask questions, two different sets of questions about the project, broader questions, especially we need to know if there's going to be potential collaboration across campuses, have they reached out to other librarians, and then questions that are much more evidence synthesis related, such as identifying gold standard articles. And then let's talk about using the form. So this form serves three main purposes. It gathers information prior to the consultation, so we are ready to go, slightly less surprised during our conversation. It also works really well to structure the conversation. It gives us something to refer to, gives us a little more of a flow. And it's also really valuable to maintain a record of what we've talked about, any agreed upon tasks, if there's a timeline, and especially any follow-up questions that either the researcher needs to respond and get back to us, or we need to follow up with the researcher. And so that was really quick. We can talk about more later, but let's talk about tracking requests. So as I mentioned way back in the several phases, in our assessment phase, we track our incoming requests in a very basic Google sheet. I've listed out what we collect. But overall, we're interested in gauging trends across departments. We want to know who they're contacting. And most importantly, are we supporting the requests? Are we offering a referral? Or is it clear that we're not the right fit? And I'll pass it back to Angela to close this out.
So just to sort of round us up in 24 seconds, what's ahead for us? Our organizational restructuring is continuing. The work is continuing. None of us have a crystal ball or even a magic 8 ball to really know what the future holds, but these are just a few of the things that have been on our mind. More training, assessing our documentation, and then ultimately it's the last bullet, whatever our service structure, as Matt was saying this morning, we researchers. Thank you for your time, and the slides have our chat information if you want to reach out and if there's time for more questions. So thank you so much.